So we're going to talk about today again, minimalist training. Just going to set this up with the key points. One mistake that I've seen is people trying to replicate their previous routine. We've got a different training situation now than what we were planning for a few months ago. So if you've been strength training already, now you're trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to do with the canceled races of spring and summer? How are we lining up training for this time? And I've seen a lot of people, trying to load up a bunch of toddlers on your back to try to do push-ups and stuff like that. And so what I'm going to propose instead is that we focus on 5 different goals for training during this time than we would with conventional strength training. The first of those is have fun. And I know, okay, it's cliche. Everybody says have fun. One of the reasons I became a strength coach was because I'm passionate about lifelong physical activity. And I think that strength training has a ton of potential there, and that coaches have an opportunity to introduce that as something that athletes can do outside of training and especially after training too. So the focus of this webinar is going to be how we're going to set ourselves up for when we return to rowing, but eventually rowing ends, and rowing's better than a lot of other sports in terms of opportunities to compete as an adult through masters rowing. But for the vast majority of athletes, when you graduate, something different is going to happen. Or maybe you can come back to rowing down the road, but there's going to be a gap. And so I think that for strength training, with what I'm going to present today, we can get a workout in anytime, anywhere, with essentially any equipment situation in, the 30 minutes. And I think that especially with the coronavirus time too, that's an opportunity to just sort of unplug, zone out, take control of your day, get something physical, tangible done. And I think that there's a lot of benefit for that mentally, physically, and then also the next things we're going to talk about with actual training effects. So our first major goal here is to at least maintain, if not improve, force production. So if you're in this minimalist training situation, you're used to training with free weights, heavier loads. Okay, if you're a relatively new rower, if you're relatively new to strength training, then you can probably use this time to improve force production. If you've got 4 or 5 years of training under your belt, you're pretty experienced in lifting heavy loads, then maybe we're just shooting for maintain. Next goal is going to be maintain or increase muscularity. So again, we're talking about if you're on the relatively newer side, you can definitely still improve muscularity with this training. If you're a more experienced athlete, then maybe we're just shooting for maintain. What that enables us to do is use this time to focus on our 2 other major goals of increasing or improving work capacity, which is basically the amount of muscular effort that you can do in a relatively short amount of time. So for that, we can use higher frequency training. We can use lower rest and higher volume training as well, because we're training with a lower load than we usually would be due to the lack of free weights. And then our other major goal is going to be improving athleticism and movement quality. So again, we could use this time to train different movements than we typically would through regular rowing training. I've seen a lot on the internet over the last couple of weeks to suggest that people are going to be doing nothing but push-ups, squats, hip thrusts, and planks for the next 2 or 3 months. And one, that's a really boring way to train. I think you're just going to drive yourself crazy by the end of this. And then the other thing is that it doesn't really fill in any of those gaps. So during a normal rowing training year, when we have so much training to do, it's often hard to train all those other qualities. So without the rigorous rowing training, now we've got time to fill in all those gaps, and that is going to make for a better return to rowing. All that stuff is going to help improve rowing when we can actually get back to it. Not a goal of minimalist training right now is making it feel like erging. Pretty common in still a lot of strength training for rowing is trying to just replicate the same rowing training, and we're not trying to make strength training during this time become aerobic training. I think that there are other ways that we can get aerobic training in through still abiding with physical distancing, either running or biking, or if you do have access to an erg, then let's get all of our aerobic training in that way. Use strength training to focus on these other major goals, and that'll be more short and long-term effective, and lower risk of injury too, from not just doing so much volume training on the strength training. So like I said, the role of strength training is to improve movement patterns, build muscles, to generate and transfer stroke force to keep it off of the skeletal structures, increase loading capacity, and then finally, availability is more important than ability. So when we're talking about rowing, it doesn't matter how strong you are, how fit you are, how fast you are, if you're not healthy enough to actually row on race day. So as a strength coach, these major points are always my focus. And I wrote down from watching Kevin's erg talk that my role is basically to build the physical characteristics so that athletes can do what he wants them to be able to do on the ergs. That everything that we talked about, from the technical focus, and all of the technique points in that, if the athlete doesn't have the physical characteristic, the physical ability to get into those positions, generate force from those positions, and sustain force from those positions under high load technique, deep fatigue territory, as a strength coach, that's my job, is to build those physical characteristics, build the movement patterns, build the muscular system, and improve the athlete's loading capacity over time.